Good morning, everyone. Thanks to those who joined the webinar already. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just another minute or two. I want to give your colleagues just another few seconds to join the webinar, and we'll go ahead and get started. Who joined the webinar already this morning? To introduce myself, my name is Lucas Drege. I'm a technical evangelist here with AgilePoint. Today, during the conversation, I'm joined by John Rymer, Vice President and Principal Analyst with Forrester Research. Today, during John's portion of the presentation, he's going to be discussing low-code's role in customer platforms. We'll transition then to AgilePoint during the second portion of the presentation, and I'm going to cover some developments specific to Salesforce that will really change the way that you look at the platform and build applications within it. So with that being said here, before I kick it off to John, I want to bring us to our first poll, which is going to help sort of understand where we are in terms of our attendees and what you're interested in. So we have our first question here. What are your roles related to customer platforms such as CRM? Business users on the sales and marketing side, business analysts, developers, solution architects, or other? So I'm starting to see a few answers trickle in here, but want to give you guys another 30 seconds or so to put your answers, and we'll go ahead and review the results as a group. All right, seeing a few more trickle in here, about 15 more seconds, and we'll go ahead and bring up those poll results. All right, great. I'm just pulling up my poll results here. Okay, so looking pretty heavy on the developer side of things, and then a fairly even split otherwise. That's great. You know, a lot of what you're going to see today is obviously relevant to a developer role, though, you know, we definitely do enable less technical folks as well to build these types of applications. So with our first poll out of the way here, you know, wanted to turn it over to John Rymer, let him introduce himself, and take his portion of the presentation here.
Thanks, Lucas. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar. Hi, everyone. I'm John Rymer. I'm an analyst here at Forrester Research, and my coverage is primarily these days public cloud platforms and what we call low-code platforms, of which AgilePoint is one. What I'm hoping to do today, and I'm really psyched to see there are solutions architects here as well, is highlight a situation that we see emerging out in the market that's creating some headaches, and the research that we've been doing is aimed at trying to head off those headaches, and low code platforms we think can play a key role here. So let's move on to the next slide. Customer platforms is the center point here. But let's take a step back. The big picture here that we're seeing among all of our clients and you know, just in the economy in general, is a new wave of automation investments that's all aimed at transforming businesses from analog states to digital states. So what I'm showing here is a picture of a you know, fairly typical product company that's taking in materials and runs a supply chain and does R&D and manufactures products, sells them through a channel, maybe a retail channel and then on to a customer. All of the processes that you see portrayed above and below that value chain. Companies are trying to digitize those processes. They're trying to make them into bits instead of people running around and analog processes. And the reason they're doing this is because we're all under such pressure to deliver innovation, to deliver customer experience, to respond to opportunities and problems so quickly that the only way we can function is by translating everything that we do into a digital form. Once it's in bits, we've got a heck of a lot of flexibility and a lot of ability to respond to situations, to understand situations, and really drive our business. Next slide. Now, when companies tackle these digital transformations, they are well advised, and most do start by centering on their customers. They start with the customer experience. So, you know, many started with mobile apps because that was a new form of customer experience they absolutely had to have. But then they go further and they start to digitize all of the processes that sit behind the way they interact with their customers and serve their customers, and the way they prospect for new customers and win new business. So the customer platform has become this center point for digital transformation that has become very, very important for customers for companies to achieve their goals of growth and profitability and so forth as you go. So the context is we're transforming to digital and we're centering on customer platforms. Next slide. Now, when a lot of people, when they tackle this challenge, they've got to answer, what is our customer platform going to be? A lot of them start with CRM, customer relationship management. And this makes sense. So much of their information about their customers is managed, in fact, in a CRM application. And there are a number of big, well-known vendors out there, Microsoft and Salesforce and SAP and Oracle, and there's a whole set of vendors out there that have been in place for quite some time. And so there's all this information about customer in CRM. Why don't we use that as a base for our customer platform? And it's a very powerful premise. And in fact, the vendors are pushing their product sets, their functionality, and their visions to really energize that kind of a scenario. The slide you see in front of you is one of the major CRM vendors, and the promises that they make, the vision that they have for that they're putting out to customers. And when you look at these 6 items, who wouldn't want that? It's very, very powerful. Leveraging the information that's being stored and the customer processes that are running in the CRM environment to go further, to do one-to-one marketing, to produce applications, including mobile apps, really quickly, to use analytics to understand customers at an unprecedented, at new levels, and so forth. It's a very, very powerful vision, and a lot of people are adopting it. Next slide. And as they adopt it, many of them run into a lot of trouble. And that's what we're really here to address. That's what we're really seeking to address in our research, is avoiding the trouble as you seek to build your customer platform by looking at by understanding the problem more completely than we do today. So let's look at the problem. Next slide. So a lot of folks, as I said, will start their journey to a customer platform by centering on the CRM app that they have, or perhaps they'll bring in a new CRM app, and they love it. The CRM apps, particularly if they're newer, they're modern. They're way more. They look better. They're way more responsive. The designs are much more appealing. The functionality is much more modern than the CRM apps from the old days of client server or even the web. And the people generally, when they first adopt a CRM platform, are quite happy with the responsiveness and the ease with which that app supports their work. And also, they part of the reason they're happy with it is because that CRM app tends to be focused on one or two, maybe two groups within the organization. Next slide. So what happens is there's this happiness with this technology choice, and other groups start to look at their colleagues who are quite happy and say, hey, I want that. That looks really great. That's way better than what I'm working with today, the 10-year-old app that I'm working with today, or the 10-year-old systems of today. I want that. And so, again, we're after a customer platform here, so other groups start to get invited into the environment. So there are more instances that are created to address additional departments and additional groups. those additional folks bring with them requirements that yield customization requests. So there are customizations to the data model or the processes or the user experience, the user interface. There are, many of the CRM vendors provide more than just CRM. They provide other products or other clouds, and so there's a request to add functionality through those additional products. And again, part of what we're looking at here is a platform to support lots of apps, including apps that address customers, and so the demands for apps escalate as well. So you've got a situation where people are happy, other people want to be happy. They like that application. They like what they see over there, and there's a whole lot of additional demands that get piled on to that initial CRM investment. More as we end up scaling out that investment quite a bit. Next slide. And in that scaling out, we are planting the seeds of a lot of heartache. Oftentimes, these demands for more are met very opportunistically, and they're met without appropriate planning and forethought about architecture, about maintenance of hundreds of applications, about managing conflicting demands and conflicting views of key data elements from different departments. And so what ends up happening is these companies end up creating a mess. They end up creating an unsustainable and actually unresponsive environment, and they're just stuck. So we call this the scale dilemma. And the dilemma is you've got great responsiveness, you've made a huge improvement for your business, but as you scale, that responsiveness disappears. And the costs, and your costs will go up because every change requires so much work to test out impacts on the others that are using the environment. So we're seeing this quite a lot, and we think that the fundamental problem here is one that of people are approaching the creation of their customer platforms by adopting an app, by adopting an application, when they really should be approaching the creation of that customer platform as adopting a platform. And those are very different things. Adopting an app is very, very different from adopting a platform. So let's next slide. Let's look at a little more deeply about what happens here. Oh, I'm sorry. I overlooked this example. Here's an example of a very large public sector exercise that experienced this problem. You could see they went from a single organization using the CRM app to 7 instances to serve other organizations, lots and thousands of seats, hundreds of customizations, many apps. We couldn't even count the number of apps. We couldn't get an accurate count, and as a result, they ended up in a very unhappy place and having to do quite a lot of work to get out of that box. All right, next slide. Let's take a deeper look at what happens here. As I said, the fundamental problem is adopting a platform is different from adopting an app. When you adopt an app as the basis for a customer platform, you get a data model that comes along with that app. You get a set of internal processes that come along with that app. You get a user interface that comes along with that app. As soon as you start to customize that app, as we all know, you raise the amount of management effort that you need then to roll forward to do changes. This is true even with cloud-based CRM. Even though cloud-based CRM vendors do promise, and they do, in fact, roll forward and with new releases and preserve customizations, it's not always the case. And particularly, oftentimes oftentimes a customer will create a customization to fill a gap within the app, and then the vendor 2, 3 releases down the road, we'll introduce standard feature. We'll introduce a standard feature, and that customization then needs to be transitioned into the standard feature. So customizations add to the difficulty of management, and they slow you down. They can slow you down. You want to really be very, very careful about customizations of apps, even if they're cloud apps. And then there's an additional level here, which is a customer platform needs to be able to support other apps, even apps that are independent of the CRM app. Maybe they address a particular business function that's not part of the standard CRM functionality, or maybe they address a channel or a particular customer interaction or a partner interaction, or and on and on. So when you build apps on a platform that is a customized app, you're adding a whole lot of complexity to that environment. You end up with you can end up with a really complex data model, particularly if you're undisciplined about it, as a lot of people are. You can end up creating a lot of duplication. How many definitions of order exist in your firm? How many definitions of partner exist in your firm? If you're undisciplined, as many are, you end up with lots and lots of different definitions that make creating apps and maintaining apps, most importantly, really, really difficult. And in some cases we've seen it is chaotic and almost requires a restart. And then you've got third-party products. All these CRM vendors have third parties, have partners who are adding really useful functionality to the CRM base, but they're bringing their own data model extensions and their own processes, and they add to the mix. This is, again, if you are undisciplined, as many are, you end up with quite a complex environment, and that complexity is what kills your responsiveness. Because every time you make a change, you've got to do this enormous regression testing cycle to ensure that you're not breaking things for other, for people that are dependent now on this environment. So what do we do? Next slide. There's a whole set of practices that we've identified that I'm going to just highlight here and then drill in on one of them. There are these five practice areas that we advocate to avoid this scale dilemma in pursuing the customer platforms and addressing CRM as part of that environment. You can see that that we're addressing the best fit for the CRM environment. It may be that it's really good as a system of record for customers, but not as good as a platform. We're addressing issues like change management and architecture, expertise. I mean, each one of these areas we find has been an issue, and really are important practices for people to adopt as they tackle this. But I want to highlight and zero in on the second of our practices, which is all about architecture. And again, it's about architecting a platform, not just an app and not just a solution. This is really, really crucial. It turns out, and oftentimes overlooked. So let's flip the slide and start that discussion. So there's a really old and trusty idea in IT management called architectural layering, and the idea here is that you put function when you design your architecture. You don't overload any one element. You layer the functionality so that you can scale, so that you can maintain the overall architecture, without having to jump through hoops and without having an enormous amount of complexity. And this is one of those ideas that just because we've gone to a cloud era, the cloud era of IT, doesn't mean we should forget this idea. Many people seem to have forgotten this idea, but it's a really key concept. And in this problem of the customer platform, it's a really, really important idea to bring to the effort. So you can see that at the core here of the customer platform is data that is shared by all the apps. Now, some of that data may come from and may be managed by CRM, but it may not be all of the data that is shared by multiple apps. We may get data from a master data management system, or we may get data from another source, and all of the data in the CRM system, for example, may not be shared by all of the apps. So we want to get to that core set, just that core set that we need, and allow for other variations, other data definitions to exist outside of that. Now we've called that master data here, crucial idea that generally tends to be managed separately. Documents and content generally it's better to segregate those and to manage those in a separate environment. And lastly, the apps, the cross-org processes, the apps, the mobile apps, the web apps, and so forth. Oftentimes it's going to be a very good idea to segregate those apps into a separate layer within the architecture. Next slide. This is where low code comes in. Most of the folks who are pursuing these customer platforms come at them from an applications point of view. They are CRM people. They are not hardcore Java developers, or they're not. They come at it from a business function and a business process and an apps point of view, and they love low code. And the CRM products out there generally provide low code platforms to go along with their environments to support customizations, and they're very popular because they don't require a lot of coding. They allow people to do customizations through declarative tooling and modeling and so forth. But as we've seen, if the layering isn't right and we're relying too much on the app, as augmented by the vendor's platform, we can get ourselves into a complex mess. So here's the thought. There is a very active low code market out there. I'm here to tell you, I've been researching this market for now about 4 or 5 years. There are about 60 vendors out there, and there are some great products out there that can, I think, play a role as a customization and innovation layer, accessing and leveraging a CRM investment, but moving that complexity of multiple apps and data and processes that are going to be shared by those out of the complex CRM core and putting them into a different layer. All of the CRM products out there have excellent API support, and a lot of the low code. So in other words, you can work with them and access them and actually control them externally. From an external platform. And a number of the low-code vendors are providing adapters that make it very easy to integrate with the popular CRM products out there from their environments. So the idea here is that to preserve flexibility, to avoid that drop-off in responsiveness that we saw, you would layer the architecture with CRM being responsible as a system of record really for the core customer data, but the apps portion of your customer platform, you would layer into a separate low-code environment. You get the low code which you want, but you get the architectural layering which you need to preserve the responsiveness. So let's flip the slide. So the potential benefits of this approach, as I see, you're dramatically simplifying the architecture. You've got 2 products, yes, but the architecture is not overloaded with a really complex core. You're going to be able to move a lot faster. You're going to reduce the testing surface for application changes because you've segregated the functionality to do so. You don't have to regression test everything down to the last data model element. As every time you make a change. This will result in faster delivery, more responsive delivery, particularly of changes, and it will also reduce the maintenance cost because you're not going to be spending as much effort on these long testing cycles. They cost money. You're going to simplify the customer platform, and you're going to simplify its evolution. The creation of new apps and processes and so forth should be a lot simpler. Essentially, you're choosing the best of breed for multiple roles within your architecture, and you're going to use your CRM investments for what they really are good at, and you're going to segregate the other functions that you need within your customer platform into the appropriate layers. Again, so that you can preserve your flexibility and your responsiveness as you go forward. So, thank you for your attention. If you flip the slide, you'll see my virtual business card, and I'd love to hear any and all feedback. This is very active research we're working on. We're trying to understand how to help people avoid this issue and get the best they can out of the opportunity. So, thanks for listening, and I'll turn it back over to Lucas.
Great, thank you, John. And for those on the webinar here, just wanted to remind you all that we do want to encourage interaction. We do have the GoToWebinar question panel as well as our polls. But if you want to stick around, we've set aside a few moments towards the end of the webinar. If you have questions, we can have John address them. If it makes more sense for the AgilePoint team to address them, we can do that as well. But definitely did want to let everyone know that we have some time allocated to address your questions. So with John's portion out of the way, as I mentioned earlier, my portion of the presentation here is going to focus specifically on some of the more recent developments from AgilePoint, right? Really what this is going to do here is fundamentally change the way that you look at Salesforce and building applications on that platform. So why are you still here? What are you going to take away from this portion of the presentation? Well, there's a few things that I want to illustrate here. First and foremost, right, we're going to show an end-to-end application that includes not only responsive forms, right, forms that we can access from any device, be that a tablet, a mobile phone, or the desktop, but also enterprise-grade workflow, right, with logic and business rules that are custom to your particular requirements, as well as integration with 40-plus systems, right? John mentioned that a lot of the low-code applications these days are focusing on integration with different data sources, and this is certainly a focus in the AgilePoint platform. Now, everything you'll see today is going to be applicable to Salesforce in specific, though it can certainly work with Dynamics CRM, the SAP or Oracle CRMs as well. But did want to point that out, though we'll be showing a Salesforce-specific example, does apply to really any CRM. And the app that you will be seeing runs natively within Salesforce.com. It's a native Force.com page, no iframes required. Right? I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the implications on the security side there. Kind of along those same lines, right? This is an application that's available in the App Exchange, right? So you can trust it. We've been through extensive security review, as some of my team can attest here. And really what the result is here is an application that can be embeddable within Salesforce that references data from essentially any source, right? The example today will focus on Salesforce, we'll focus on Box as well as NetSuite, but essentially the data sources underneath can be exchanged for the system of record of your choosing. So that brings us to the problem statement, right? Why are we here? Why is AgilePoint as an organization exist, right? And it kind of goes back to a lot of what John was mentioning here. When we go beyond using our customer platforms, from just using things like leads and opportunities, managing contacts and such, to doing more, right? The first option oftentimes is writing code, right? As John had mentioned, not only is this incredibly difficult, right? What we end up with is something that is essentially an instant legacy, right? Something that is not really serving the business, but more burdensome from an upgrade perspective, from a migration standpoint, and things along those lines. So with that being said, the AgilePoint methodology really looks to move away from generating code behind the scenes. That's probably what you've seen with a lot of the low-code platforms that are in the market today, right? And incorporates a lot of the functionalities that you'd otherwise need multiple tools for, right? I'm sure everyone has seen MuleSoft's big IPO. That sort of integration with different data sources is something that comes out of the box with this technology, right? There's obviously also the human interaction component of it as well, right? Forms, right? And how we can action our processes from any device anywhere. And then obviously being able to customize different types of business rules and conditions, right, based on the specific requirements of your business, right? All of these here, essentially this amounts to the model that we design on our canvas by dragging activities and integration points onto the workflow canvas, ends up being the model that we then execute. So what does this mean? Well, as John was saying, right, this allows us to be responsive to the different needs of our customers, right? It allows us to develop experiences for customers, for partners and suppliers, and have it located centrally, in this case, on the Salesforce.com platform. And then lastly here, before I get into my demonstration, I wanted to cover just a quick customer case study. Now, to set the stage here with Hitachi, obviously that's a name that I think most of us probably know. They do have a 5,000 user Salesforce deployment, and for about a year, they were struggling with building this application natively. They wanted to build an RFQ process for their global sales team, and as I mentioned, struggled for about a year because it is a fairly complex application, right? Not only does this encapsulate the sales team, right? It encapsulates their project lifecycle management solutions, their ERP systems, right? So this is far beyond just the sales team, right? These are all of the folks who are supporting their sales process. And that's really what we see, right? For these applications that support sales, it often involves different systems, different groups of people, right, that can be scattered across the enterprise. So really what we're doing here, leveraging that independent process layer that John had mentioned, AgilePoint acts as the glue for all of these different systems and different people involved in making these decisions. So what was the result? Right, as we mentioned, Hitachi struggled for about a year trying to build these applications natively. And as you can see here on screen, there are some pretty compelling stats, right? Their first production app was launched in 2 months. I think we just got news of that a couple of days ago. So obviously contrasted to what it would take to develop this natively, right? Not only are we looking at a significant time savings in getting the application out the door, but also, as John mentioned, on an ongoing basis, right? We've made the maintenance much, much easier. So that brings us to today's example. This is the demonstration that I'll be showing here in just a moment. And I picked customer onboarding because that tends to resonate with just about every organization. Most of the folks that we speak to are familiar with this process. And it's a great example of what we're doing because it is a sales process that touches, as I mentioned, not only different systems, but also different people within the organization, right? So being able to tie it all together and leverage it through the Salesforce UI is obviously a big win, right? Because we have the UI that folks are familiar with while still taking advantage of that independent process layer that John had referenced. So before I do that here, before I jump into my demonstration, I'm bringing up a poll and really wanted to know how you're building applications in Salesforce today, right? We have a few options up on screen here from Lightning, Force.com, Heroku, third-party apps, or maybe you're not building applications in Salesforce just yet. I want to give you folks a few seconds to input those answers. And I'm seeing a few trickle in already, so I want to give you guys just another second here, and we'll go ahead and review those results as a group. All right, still seeing a few trickling in. All right, let's bring up those poll results. Okay, looks like a few of you have yet to get started down this path in building apps in Salesforce, while still others are looking at Force.com as well as Lightning. Mm-hmm. So we'll definitely address these questions here at the end during our Q&A session. Go ahead and input those into the questions panel if you'd like, or just wait till the end here and we'll go ahead and address those as well. All right, so I'm going to hide those poll results here, and then I'm going to share out my AgilePoint interface. All right, so what you should be seeing here on screen is a browser window. This is the AgilePoint product itself. You'll see that I've accessed this over via the browser, though you can essentially access what you're seeing here from an end user perspective in really any number of portals, right? My demonstration today will show Salesforce, but this Work Center here, the end user components of the platform, essentially can be inserted in any portal that will accept custom HTML. All right, so that's certainly an option, though today's example will focus around Salesforce. So just to give a quick lay of the land here, there's a few different modules within the AgilePoint product itself. And obviously, depending on what you're doing in the organization, what your role is, who you are, right? Maybe we'll have access to different modules. We can certainly security trim that. But as your standard end user, maybe I'm an administrator of some sort, right? Most of my day is going to be spent within the Work Center here. This is my task management piece, right? I can see what tasks have been assigned to me. right? Perhaps if I'm working as a part of a call center, I might have a queue of shared work list items that I can work against, right? This is my home base as far as managing tasks and launching new applications is concerned. Just going to quickly open up the app landing page here, and very similar to what you saw from a module perspective at the top here. Everything that we can access from an applications perspective can be security trimmed, right? So I can have access to just a subsection of different applications, right? As is the case here. Now, transitioning over to the demo itself, right? This demo, as I mentioned, is going to be a customer onboarding use case. And the way that this will be initiated is once an opportunity in Salesforce has been marked closed won. Now, what you're seeing here is a pretty standard opportunity page. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with it, right? I've brought in a few things that I think are going to be important for the remainder of the demonstration. First and foremost being the amount field, obviously opportunity name and an account, right? All very relevant. And to kick this off, I'll simply save this demo or save this opportunity as closed won. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is we've kicked off this process, and I'll start to receive tasks, right? Now, I'm going to show a combination of accessing tasks via email as well as through the AgilePoint UI itself, just to kind of give you a sense of the flexibility here. But just keep in mind that, wherever I can access these tasks, I can action them from a number of different locations, right? Obviously, have a notification delivered directly to my inbox, right? Accessing the AgilePoint UI itself, or, I can go ahead and take a look at this directly through Salesforce. Now, what I've done here, this is an out-of-the-box component, right? Very similar to what you saw just a moment ago, right? The AgilePoint components, the AgilePoint dashboard, have been surfaced within Salesforce.com, right? So this is a native Force.com page, right? We're not using iframes here, as we mentioned earlier, right? Completely native integration, and as I mentioned, an out-of-the-box component, right? So the level of effort to get this wired up is fairly minimal. Now, what you've seen here is I do have a task assigned to me. And I think just for visibility's sake, I want to show this here and just show you what our process is going to look like. Okay, great. So you can see here we have a couple of different swim lanes for the different decision points, right? I've called out, what's happening at essentially each stage of the process, right? First and foremost, we need to understand how to route this particular customer onboarding for approval. So the first thing to point out here is the application is going to evaluate who I am, right, according to Salesforce, and route the decisions accordingly, right? Because I am located in North America, you can see here that the process has taken the Americas approval path. And if I go back to my task management piece here, that's what I have here. This is my first assigned task. Now, directly from this flyout window, I have a number of options in terms of what I want to do here. Right, you saw just a moment ago, I can click View Process, which gives me, from an end user's perspective, a good overview of where things are in my process, right? Whose desk is the next action item on? How far are we from completing this process? Obviously, reassigning tasks and task rework, right? If the request wasn't submitted correctly, right, maybe we can kick that back to our submitter. Or if I have quite a bit on my plate at the moment, it's very easy for me to reassign this task. Now, obviously, depending on the process and your requirements, right, you may not want to allow for this rework or for this reassign capability. So certainly something that can be configured, but just wanted to kind of highlight some of the flexible options here we have in terms of assigning these tasks or maybe redirecting them where it makes most sense. So I selected that I want to accept this task here. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to bring up a form. Now, this form I'm obviously accessing over my desktop, but everything that we build from a forms perspective in AgilePoint is going to be responsive. So I'll get the same functionality out of my mobile phone, whether it's in landscape or portrait, as well as on my tablet, right? We'll obviously make a few adjustments from a UI perspective on your behalf, but the key takeaway here is everything is going to be 100% mobile ready by default. So we don't need to use specific themes or anything like that, 100% mobile ready. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out here that we brought in from our opportunity information was the opportunity value, right? We have $200,000 here. We've brought in the opportunity name, status, who the salesperson is, and I just essentially get to review this information here and make a decision based on whether I want to approve or reject this request. The process evaluated the overall deal size, calculated my maintenance and support fees for me, calculated my maximum number of users, right? Oops, looks like I'm got caps lock going on there. My apologies. So once I've validated everything, I'm going to go ahead and submit this for approval. So this is moving my process along. You saw that I got that nice confirmation email there that basically says, okay, you've moved your process on. And if I go back to my process overview here, we should see the green path lighting up. So now from a management perspective, given that I've approved this particular order, right, there's a few other steps that this process is going to follow. Right, first and foremost, we call the web service to generate license keys. Right. Secondly, we inputted all of the opportunity-related information, right? The deal size, the maintenance amounts, user counts, what have you, everything pertinent to this opportunity, and we've inserted it into a Word document, which is going to become our licensing agreement. Right. So you can see here that particular word shape has passed on, and now the next stage in our process is to send the customer agreement, which we've built as a part of this process, via DocuSign. Now, obviously, that would require licensing on the DocuSign side of things, but I did want to highlight from a flexibility standpoint that we can work with a number of different digital signature providers, the other being certified. So if I open this up here, we'll see that this Word document has been populated with the details from my Salesforce opportunity. Right, so it's great, obviously, in that we don't have duplication of data. Right, all of that information is going to be brought over for us automatically. You can see here, it's populated my opportunity name, user count, the details of their license. It's calculated my maintenance costs per year. And then if I scroll all the way down here, I can go ahead and input my signature and move this along. Great. We'll go back to my process model here. And in just another second, right after this 30 seconds activity has passed, and really we just added this for demos for timing purposes, right? We're going to go see validate if the customer has signed the document digitally. We're going to make an update as far as the record goes in Salesforce. And then the remaining steps, we're actually going to deliver the license keys, upload that into Salesforce so that we have a historical view of everything that's taken place, right, before this process finishes here. So you'll see here in my inbox, I've just received the digital signature, right? And then now the remaining portion here has just come in, all my license keys. Right, so at the completion of this process here, we've validated that this is an opportunity that we want to proceed with. Right, we went ahead and sent that for approval to our regional VP. As a result, we generated the license keys by calling a web service, sent the document for digital signature via DocuSign, and then after all that's been wrapped up, we send out the license keys themselves and go ahead and upload all that into Salesforce. So if I go back now into my my opportunity and then into the account, if I scroll down, we'll see that we've attached that document right here. Okay, so from a demo perspective, that's what I was hoping to cover. Wanted to quickly transition back to my slide deck and see if we have any questions here along with our last poll. So let's go ahead and bring up that last poll question here. All right, great. So our last question here, how long does it take on average for you to create a custom process app in Salesforce? So we have a few different options here, 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, or 6+ months. So I'm starting to see some answers trickling in here. I want to give another few seconds just to get those last few votes in. And then let's bring up our poll results. Okay, great. Yeah, so it looks like a lot of you are falling in that middle 3 to 6 month range. That's certainly in line with what we see a lot of our customers. When they come to us initially, they're having these struggles where they're kind of languishing for quite some time, right, in terms of building these apps. So that's great.
And I would add, Lucas, that typically we'll see the initial experience to be more in the 1 to 3 months phase, and then it drops off because for the the reasons that we highlighted, the potential risks of complexity that we highlighted, and all of a sudden that crisp experience, which a lot of people are depending on, just goes away. And it's like, wait a minute, what happened? What's going on here? This doesn't look so good all of a sudden.
That's right. Great. So I know that we had a couple of questions here. I think probably for you, John, I would imagine, as well as on our side. Why don't we start with taking a few of these questions here that we got?
Sure.
All right. Looks like one of the first questions, and I think this is going to be a question for you, John. Why would I look at something like this? I've been using Force.com to build applications. What would precipitate me changing to something like AgilePoint?
Well, so Force.com is one of the platforms that Salesforce provides, probably the main one that we find people using, along with the Salesforce CRM. And then, as we said, there are other vendors have their versions of that. They have equivalents to that. The issue is that when you're working with a CRM vendor's platform, and again, Force is an example, what you're doing is you're customizing. You're not only building custom apps and custom apps on that, but you're customizing the core data model. And oftentimes you're affecting the data model you get with the app, and you're customizing the processes you get with the app. So what you lack then is appropriate architectural layering, particularly if you're not pursuing architectural layering. A lot of people just jump on the tool and they start creating customizations fairly willy-nilly, and they end up without a lot of planning, and they end up with a mess, as I described earlier. So if you segregate those customizations out into a separate layer, you're going to have a much better experience. You're going to retain the initial responsiveness that you experience as you scale up. And so, you can certainly do that by exercising some discipline to some degree, because the tool that the vendor's providing you is affecting the core data model of that application. If you go with a third-party tool, you get an opportunity for a cleaner layering of those applications and the data and the processes that you're developing. I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense.
No, that was great. Thank you, John. So I have another question here coming in. Are the AgilePoint forms with data available from Salesforce after the process is completed? So the answer to that is yes. So that is a feature that we actually have baked into the product out of the box, and it's what we call our report view. So even once the process is completed, if you're using our forms, you do get that historical view of all of the data that's been entered, right? So this is available, in Salesforce or really any other system that you'd be using AgilePoint alongside with.
Lucas, I'm thinking about the answer that I gave to that question. There's another dimension of this that has to be that I think is important to consider as well. Now that I think about it, think a little bit more about it. One of the things to evaluate when you're looking at using the tool or the platform that the CRM provider is giving you, is offering to you, is the functional completeness of that platform, the power of that platform. Not all low-code environments are equally comprehensive, and not all of them are equally scalable, and not all of them are equally secure, and not all of them, provide best of breed kind of functionality. And so that's another potential reason to look outside of to look at alternatives to what the the vendor's providing, because you may actually be able to get a better development environment, more comprehensive, more scalable, easier to use, et cetera. That's another dimension here, I think, that people ought to look at.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for adding that. It's great to have that insight. So one other question we have here, is this a packaged Salesforce app, or does it require custom solution development? The answer to that is this is a prepackaged app. It's available through App Exchange. We kind of alluded to the fact earlier that we've gone through that very extensive security review with Salesforce. So this is something that's an out-of-the-box component. Really, the effort would be wiring up the component on the Salesforce side to your AgilePoint component. But again, fairly straightforward, something you can certainly do in a matter of hours.
I would just add, Lucas, that's an important dimension that's another important dimension when you're working with a CRM vendor and its partners. Is the CRM vendor taking responsibility for vetting partners? Salesforce is one of the vendors that does, and so you get a certain level of assurance, as you said, about security and about the partners. Has a partner actually done the work to fit into the security framework of the CRM? The data model extensions that are being created, you can trust those, more than you can just one partners that are not vetted. That's another piece of the strategy to consider as you roll forward with these customer platforms.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right. So getting a question around how is AgilePoint different from MuleSoft, Jitterbit, Dell Boomi, et cetera? Well, this kind of goes back to, I think, one of the first slides that I had shared, and it kind of goes over the different components of the AgilePoint platform, right? MuleSoft has been in the news as of late with their big IPO, but, really what they're focusing around is data integration, right? A lot of these traditional applications have been very data-driven, right? So facilitating exchange between system A and system B is really the MuleSoft focus, right? Now, that's obviously one area of emphasis for AgilePoint. Integration with 40+ systems, has sort of been a big point of pride for us. But really, it's about providing, the fully encapsulated solution, right? Beyond just the integration with data, right? Is obviously the human element, right? How we can interact with these forms across different types of devices, and then obviously the workflow, right, and the business logic that drives these applications, right? So what you would really otherwise need, maybe 2, 3, a handful of applications for, something that AgilePoint delivers in a single package. So really, those are the major differences from my view. John, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that, or is?
No, well, I just would say, I think you hit it. They're just different categories of products, and one of the decision points as you create a strategy should be, can we rely on an external platform for the integration to get the integration we need, or do we need a separate integration product? A MuleSoft, the core of their value is integration. They're not a low-code development platform. So, if you're going to really go with an engineered sort of integration solution, don't expect that you're also going to get a low-code development environment along with that acquisition. It's really a different category that can be complementary. But, as you point out, many of the low-code platforms have really excellent integration functionality. So you may be able to just rely on them for that.
Absolutely. And I think your point of them being different applications for different purposes is well taken. I think what happens a lot of the time is folks will see, MuleSoft has a diagram of this sort or of that sort, and I think it tends to lend to some confusion. So thank you for clearing that up. And I think we'll take one more question here, and this is a good one. It's, does AgilePoint work standalone? So I guess that means without Salesforce. Absolutely. What you saw today was an example that highlighted, the very deep native integration with Salesforce, right? But as John mentioned, this is an independent process application. So, though we use Salesforce today, You can certainly insert dynamic CRM, any portal of your choosing. We see a lot in the SharePoint or the SAP worlds, right? But yes, absolutely, this is an application that can exist totally standalone, does not have any dependencies on really any other data storage or any other type of application. All right, great. So I'm not seeing any more questions rolling in here. So I wanted to take a moment to thank you, John Rymer, for joining us today. Definitely loved your portion of the presentation today, and thank you to everyone who's attended. Definitely appreciate your questions and your input. All right, here, and then just lastly, wanted to leave you with some ways to take a closer look into the AgilePoint piece for Salesforce. I have a snip here of our page on the App Exchange. Feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like a copy of the recording, or if you'd like to test drive the product itself. We're happy to spend some time with you, understand what your requirements are, and then we'll certainly set about a plan to execute against that. Certainly, a recording will be available. I see that last question popping in here from Andrew. We will make the recording available here in the coming days, so no worries if you missed a portion. All right, that's all from our end, folks. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you again, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.